Welcome to Good Journeys Tarot. I'm Rosemary, and this is 78 Cards in 78 Weeks, where we explore one card in the tarot as I attempt to draft my own version of the cards. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here today. As always, I like to share a little bit of what's happening here that you're not seeing on screen each week. And there's not really a lot going on right now. In fact, today I just wanted to sleep all day. I would have been happy to just sleep on through the broadcast. But I did want to remind you of one thing. And that is that the winter edition of the Cartomancer is currently available for pre-orders, both the electronic version and the print version. So if you have not already, do hop over to there and check that out. I will have an article in that edition on the privilege of tarot. Today, we are going to be talking about this fellow, this fiery fellow called the Knight of Wands. And my guest today is actually a friend of mine for many years now. We met at a UU church where neither of us are involved with anymore. And she was hosting a tea and tarot once a month, where we got together at her house and she shared some of her fabulous baked goods and tea, and we talked tarot. And up until that time, I had been dabbling with the tarot a little bit, trying to study it and whatnot. It wasn't really until I started attending those activities with her and learning from her that I really dived more deeply into it and got more involved in collecting decks and talking about the tarot online and that kind of thing. In fact, she was the first person that I ever interviewed on YouTube. The very first video that I did was an interview with her about her deck, the Minoan Tarot. Let's welcome Laura Perry.
Hi.
Laura.
Hi.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see you.
I know. It's been, 2 or 3 years now?
It's been a while. We only live across town from each other, but yeah, that's how these things go.
It's like there's something that's been keeping people at home.
Imagine that.
Yes. Kim is here, my friend from Seattle, who I met at Northwest Tarot Symposium. Welcome, Kim. So we are going to talk a little bit about your cards later in the broadcast because you handled gender in a specific way in your deck that was unique and interesting to me. Well, why don't we just get started talking in general about this card a little bit, and I'll share some images from decks that I have. Generally, I've always seen this card as like a card of enthusiasm and excitement, and that type of thing. What's interesting is in Waite's Pictorial Key, he doesn't mention that. He actually talks about immigration, about moving on, about pushing forward. Ben Bellwin called it, this is the card of launching, I guess beginning that enterprise, so to speak. And so most of the decks that I see are Smith-Waite based. And so they'll have our man on a horse with the fire, maybe the salamander. And I love how Robin Wood incorporated the element in the entirety of her courts in particular. And a lot of people like to put knights on motorcycles nowadays. And in this deck, all of the knights are on motorcycles, which kind of bugged me because I think there's other ways to interpret motion than motorcycles. And there's still horses, right, in society today. But for some reason, it works for me on the wands. I don't know. I guess because every motorcycle I've ever ridden has been red. So you had a couple of decks that you were going to show as well. There was one of your favorite decks you mentioned.
My favorite is actually out of print, but I like to share it because it is It was gifted to me at a New Year's party years ago. A Bardic group that I was part of had a New Year's get together, and the leader gifted me this deck and handed it to me. And I opened it and looked at it, and she said, "Great, you're going to do readings for everyone." And I was still kind of new to tarot at the time, and I was terrified. But something about this particular deck just clicked with me, and I was able to sit down and read intuitively. And so I have hung on to it since then. It is called the Sacred Circle Tarot. Shoot, I have the book for it somewhere. Yeah, here we go. I don't know if you can find the if you can find the book and deck set so much anymore. But it's by Anna Franklin and Paul Mason, and it's Celtic imagery. And they combined photography and artwork and all kinds of other things. So yeah, their keyword for the Knight of Wands is adventure. And so that, to me, that kind of, and I mean, you can see he's like heading out into the wilderness. He's got his torch and his spear, and he's going to go do the thing, So I guess that kind of plays back into the Waite Smith, the definition. But, to me, it also shows up the passion, the sort of youthful ardor that's behind the knights, and particularly the Knight of Wands.
Right. Yes, I do like that deck. I've seen it a few times available, but I haven't grabbed it yet. I've used it at your house and enjoyed it. I had to sort it out to look at the suits together, which is something I'm at some point going to have to do with my own deck, because I've been doing one card randomly drawn at a time rather than working on sets of cards. And eventually I'll want to make sure that they all look like they belong together.
Oh, so they like flow,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Instead of being 78 random images. We have some new people popping in. Jonathan Daly is here. He was on my channel last week talking about the 8 of Swords. I think it was. No, 8 of Cups. And then Tony Antoinette has popped in. She will be here next week. And you and I will draw that card in a little bit. So she'll know what she's going to be working on. I have some other deck cards here that I showed over on Instagram. For example, this one, a lot of times I see knights and or kings in wheelchairs to include ability representation. And I particularly liked this one with the from the Lost Hollow, even though it's a mix of Thoth and RWS. So you'll see it's called the Prince. I like that they made this a person of action. Their ability doesn't hold them back. And they can still go out, still be adventurous. And then I have a few here that highlight some animals, right, that we see often. I usually see foxes associated with the wand suit. I guess it's because of their fiery appearance, that the redness of them. And of course, some decks will remove the person altogether and handle gender that way and just have your horse. This one has a salamander on his face there. Yeah. And the Spacious Tarot, it was just the salamander with the wand. And then in the penumbra there was this dragon, which is obviously something many people would associate with fire from a more mythical standpoint. And it calls the card Agent. And that's something that I struggled with when I first started my deck, was how to name my court cards, because I didn't really want to use Page, Knight, Queen, and King, because those aren't things that are part of modern life for the most part.
Yeah.
It's not our everyday life. And so I did consider a lot of things, like some of these. Champion is what is used here in the Transient Light. Teen, was what Maria Strom did in the Hip Chick Tarot, um, which was my second video that I ever did on YouTube. Um, this one I have problems with. They call the Knights Messengers, which I have always associated with pages.
Hmm.
And then in the new era elements, they call them sons. So in order to balance them, they made the sons the knight equivalent and daughters the page equivalent, which kind of relates back to that Thoth idea of princesses and princes, I guess. But in the Numinous Tarot, they called them explorers. And that's actually how I started out referring to mine. But I've actually ended up going in a completely different direction, which we'll talk about when we look at my cards. So you have another deck there that is one you collaborated on. I
Yeah.
don't think I'm familiar with this.
Yeah, I have a couple friends, Tom and Nimue Brown, who are an incredible writer and artist team. They created a webcomic series that is now a book series called Hopeless Maine. And I'm a big fan. And when I started reading the books, the graphic novels, it just struck me that the artwork looked like it ought to be in a tarot deck. And so I said, hey, do you guys do tarot? Would you consider putting this in? And so I kind of helped them design it. It's entirely their art. This is clearly I'm backwards today. It's the Hopeless Maine tarot deck. It is sort of a steampunk, goth, light horror kind of combo. And it's all based on, here's the tuck box. It's all based on the characters from their graphic novel. And so that's the back of the cards has that artwork on it. And the suits, the fire suit is called Flames. The suits are flames, tentacles, crows, and night potatoes, which all references stuff from the night potatoes is earth. It all references aspects of the world that the graphic novel is set in. Mm-hmm. And so here's their Night of Flames, and I like this because this is Ed Grimes outside his general store, and he's going out to see what's there, and he is he's carrying the light with him, and to me I don't know if you can really see the look on his face, but he's gonna do it, by golly. And so that to me that really evokes the sort of passion behind all the wands. But there's something about the knights to me that's there's that point in life when you're like, oh my gosh, am I an adult? I'm an adult. How did this happen? How to adult? And to me, that's like the stage that the knights are at. And so they have a certain amount of life experience, and they're going to go do the thing. And then they get into the thing and they're like, wait a minute, how do I do the thing? And so, that's,
yeah, I've always associated the knights basically with those older teens and like college age kids, the people who are just starting out, trying to find jobs or learn their trade or that type of thing. And so I've tried to stick with that when I've been creating my cards to a certain degree. So one of the things that comes up a lot with the tarot as we look at modern decks is people look at like the Smith-Waite or the Thoth, and they're like, oh, they're just not very balanced. There's not a lot of representation of gender, of race, of ability, whatever that it may be.
Yeah.
And so people attempt to balance those things in their decks. Some have simply changed some of the male characters to female, and then some have had a system that they've used. So tell us about what you did with your deck in the Minoan Tarot. How
Okay.
we ended up with 2 cards.
2 cards for the Knight of Wands. So I've always been able to use the standard Waite Smith style setup of court cards. It's not been a problem for me. I just think of it as totally symbolic, because we don't have really a monarchic type world anymore. So I just took them as symbols. But when I started to make my own deck, one of the aspects of Minoan culture that attracts people to it, to want to study it and learn about its values and its spirituality and stuff, is that they were most likely a gender egalitarian society. And some of the art even suggests that they were accepting of non-binary people. And so I wanted to come up with a way to represent real gender egalitarianism in a deck, which means that you can't have it. The court cards they go in order, right? There's page and then knight and then queen and then king, just like in a playing card deck. And so there is a hierarchy, and I didn't want there to be a hierarchy between genders. And so I started looking around, and I discovered this one wild deck. It's a Cherokee deck from I think it's the 15th century. It's called the Carey Yale Visconti Cherokee. It's at Yale, in their Yale University, in their collections. And it has 6 court cards instead of 4 for each suit. And instead of being in 4 ranks, they're in 3 ranks with equal pairs. So essentially you have 2 pages and then 2 knights, and then the king and queen, two monarchs that are, and each one of those is equal. And I thought, well, there we go.
Sure. So the part that I guess is difficult for me is seeing the difference between them. Like when I read the descriptions in your book, my mind immediately says, okay, the Lord is the knight, right? That's how I usually think of the knight. Tell me a little bit about the lady and how you equate her with the knight.
Okay, so what I actually did for all the pages and the knights, and to a certain extent for the queens and kings, was look at the underlying concept behind the card, and then sort of divide it into 2 aspects, what you might call external and internal, or I'm usually better at explaining this sort of thing. The words are not wording so well today. I don't like the terms active and passive, but more like doing and embodying, that pair, right? And so, for instance, and I need to credit our mutual friend Julie Lepp with giving me the idea. We're familiar with the Fool's Journey, right, through the major arcana. Julie suggested, when I was designing this deck, that I also do elemental journeys, 1 through each suit. And so I did that. And so what I ended up with was, let me get my cards here, sorry, was 2 sets of what you might call keywords for each level of the court cards. And so we've got the lady and the Lord. And so the Lord is I react. This is someone who does things in reaction to the outside world. And the lady is I evoke. She is embodying the qualities of the suit of wands, as a young adult feeling their way around in the world would do. She is learning to live in that energy, to be that. And then the Lord of Daggers is learning to act out on that outside of himself in the world. So that's the distinction. They're a complementary pair.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I guess because I've always focused on this particular card as a person of action, it's easier for me to see it in the
Yeah.
Lord than the lady. But I totally get what you were going for there. Um, so, do you use reversals? I can't remember.
I have not done them so much recently, but historically, yeah, I've used reversals. I've got meanings for reversals for all the cards. So
Sure. Yes, that in the book I remember seeing them. A lot of people, almost everyone that I have on my channel says, "Well, no, not particularly, but if I think that that the cards around it imply it, then yes, I'll read the card as a reversal, whether
yeah,
I've shuffled them in or not." And that's kind of how I look at it too, because I think all of the meaning is there, regardless of which way the card is facing,
right.
and what cards are around them. So we've talked a lot about some of the keywords for the night, as far as being adventurous or a risk taker, that motion and that type of thing. I've always seen this as probably the athlete in the tarot, like that person who has got the energy to run up and down a field,
Hmm.
personally at least. And one of my ideas initially was, well, the only sport I ever played that I enjoyed at all was soccer. And so I had started out with a soccer player, which we'll see in a little bit. But I ended up calling my card the Daredevil, because I feel like this is the person who's
Yeah,
rushing in, right?
yeah.
And got that adventure going on. But on the shadow side of this card, or the reverse side, what are some of the ways that you see this card?
Well, it's a sort of, because the knights are only just learning how to be adult in the world. There's a certain level of immaturity. Um, so you get rashness, you get leaping before you look kind of stuff. Um, for me, also, there's an aspect that people get fired up about something to the point that they can't think straight about it anymore. And so they like take on with great passion these whether it's an activity or an ideal, and then you can't reason with them anymore. The passion, the flame overwhelms the reason.
Sure, absolutely. Um, and a lot of the books that I've read as I'm preparing for this and studying the card, they'll mention all of those things. So they also talk about, perhaps they might be cocky, or they might be ill-tempered, because they have that extra passion going on. Um, or they might be restless, like they want to go and go and go, and when they're not
Yeah,
able to go, they're frustrated. When they hit that wall, it can be difficult. But alternately, some people talk about it as that energy being removed, like that the person is passive, they're not making progress,
yeah,
they're um, hesitant, versus being adventurous, kind of the reverse, I guess, so to speak. What's interesting for me is, as I've been studying the cards, there are a lot of times multiple alternate ways to
yep,
look at reversals. Sometimes it's exactly a mirror image of the upright, and sometimes it just means, oh, it's a little bit less of that energy, but it's still that same energy.
right.
So let's see, what else might we talk about? Oh, I just knocked everything on the floor. Yay me. So the Golden Dawn called this the Prince of the Chariot of Fire, which is where, of course, Crowley got his concept of princes and
Right.
princesses. Which interestingly, in his deck, he didn't use chariots or horses for his princes, even though that's the title of the card. Uh, it's interesting. The card is, well, for me, I associate this card with Sagittarius, with the mutable fire sign, astrologically. And so this is that outgoing, good fortune kind of energy. Usually, fortune is on the side of this person. Maybe on the reverse, it's not, but in upright, definitely their energy and their momentum is going to produce something. At least that's the way I view it. It looks like Amber has popped in. She's the Cartomancer magazine there. And she will be here in 2 weeks talking about the card that we pulled then. So, do you have any other thoughts about the Knight of Wands that you'd like to share with us before we start looking at what I ended up with?
Yeah, I mean, mainly in terms of reversals, when I do read them, I tend to gauge what the reversal means based on the surrounding cards, like whatever's, whether there are other cards that flavor it. Because to me, the reversals aren't as set in stone. So,
right. Absolutely. Yeah, Tony said that anytime you start a new job or project, regardless of your age, you're really becoming the knight again. Because you're going to have to figure some things out along the way, right? Great thought, Tony. So let me share my screen. Where is it? They changed the word from share to present, and so now I'm always confused. So this was the image I meant to show earlier when I talked about the Cartomancer magazine, everyone. But let's look at some cards here. So this was the first night that I did, the only night that I've done so far. This was the Knight of Cups, and I called it the Charmer. And when I initially did it, it was masculine presenting. However, I think in my deck, to balance the gender, I'm going to do the cups and the pentacles as feminine pages and knights, and then the air and fire suit as masculine. But I'm still playing with it, as you can see. I kind of leaning towards a more gender neutral approach with this particular night because I like the way it looked to begin with. But I like to look at how the new cards compare to my old cards, and sometimes I completely change my old cards. And sometimes it really dictates what I do with the new cards. One of my first drafts was this, which was a specific scene in my life, which is what I've been trying to do with the deck is the whole idea was associating the tarot with my life and seeing it in my life. And this was a time in college where I was actually the one who took a risk because I don't always. I usually let other people go first and then test the waters, which literally is what we were doing. We were jumping off of an embankment into a catfish pond, which was not very deep. And I just happened to be the first one to take the plunge that day. And so this was the first thing that popped into my head. And I played with this image a little bit with and without the campfire. And then, but it kind of bugged me because this is an image that I used in another card. And in that particular card, I associated this person with feminine energy. And so since I wanted to go with a more masculine energy for my Knight of Wands, I started playing with the other ideas, like the soccer player that I talked about earlier, because that was the only sport that I ever had any interest in as a kid, and enjoyed for the most part. And so I showed these online in my Good Journeys into Tarot group, and Tony, as always, gave me valuable insights on the images, as many people do. And I actually decided I liked the bicyclist the best. And this is another story from my life. This is actually my brother, not me. The image is a little bit younger, I think, than I would like it to be, but it definitely kind of captures that moment for me. My brother would um, jump a ramp at the end of a hill in front of our house, and then go flying into the woods that are across the street. And one time he actually missed the path and he hit head on in a tree. And I just remember him riding around forever after that with his bike bent, after he recovered from his stitches. But and so that was the immediate thing that popped in my head for the Daredevil, was that them jumping ramps at our house. I really wish, I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I've got some technical skills to work on, but I'd like the bike to be in color and just the person as the silhouette. But I haven't been able to work that out yet, because all of the image I find are of a person on a bike or a bike, and I haven't figured out how to manipulate them yet. So I'll probably play with that some. I did move it to maybe try to make it look like he's on a cliff playing, give more of that Daredevil energy. So those are the thoughts for it right now, that I've been thinking about. And I try to relate all of the cards into suits. And in this case, I related this image back to the Ten of Wands. Uses the same background of the pine forest, pine trees in the background and whatnot. But this is the first set of court cards that I finished. So we'll look at them together and see if anybody has any thoughts about them. Sometimes I get good comments in my chat and from my guests about the cards that are helpful. I've redone the Queen, which I'm calling the artist at the moment, about 15 times now, because I just don't feel like she's ever been right. And mainly because she was one of the first ones I did. And I've the painting that she is painting is actually one I painted. That is a photograph of a painting that I did that's in my house. So,
something that strikes me about that one. This is the fire suit, right? But she's sitting down.
Right. Well, and in the Smith Waite they are as well. So I hadn't thought about having someone standing to paint. I guess because when I was in college, we had to stand to paint, but I hated standing to paint. I would much rather sit to paint.
Yeah, it strikes me as a very much a fire suit kind of thing for a person to be standing up to do something instead of like sitting relaxed. They would be like up.
She definitely has the least energy of the cards so far. But I tried to relate her back to the king by using a similar background. I had this idea in my head that perhaps she is the artist and he is the one selling her work, right? So, which happens with a lot of couples. Like the one will be the creator and really like the one that is responsible for everything, but then the other one's kind of the face, right, sometimes. And that's kind of how I viewed those two cards in the tarot. Yeah. Reading everyone's comments.
Yeah, that's a good point about people who are not able to stand.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so
if you were to draw her in something like a standing frame, most people who are not familiar with that piece of adaptive equipment wouldn't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So why don't we draw a card for next week? We have 15 cards left, but only 14 to choose from because I have scheduled one of the cards already for New Year's Day. I didn't want to skip both Christmas and New Year's because that would be 2 weeks in a row. Um, and didn't want to do that. So, Laura, if you will pick a number 1 to 14, we will select our card.
Let's go with 11.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, everybody always goes for 7 or 8. I'm excited. Oh, 11. Okay. So 11 would be 14, 13, 12, 11. This one. All right. And it is the 8 of Pentacles.
All right. Good
So,
card.
and this is one of those cards, like, depending on who you are reading, the 8 and the 3 of Pentacles each have similar vibes, or they could be reversed. Like one is the master and one is the apprentice, but it depends on who you're reading, which is which. So that'll be interesting to talk about next week. So is there anything that you're currently working on that you're excited to let people know about?
I don't know that there's anything in the tarot world that I'm currently working on.
That's perfectly fine. I know you have some excellent books out there as well.
I am in the middle of my second historical novel. The first one was sort of an epic with a not very happy ending, although people seem to like it anyway. But I decided to go for something much happier this time. So I'm writing a romance set in among the Minoans of ancient Crete. It is a gay romance among the bull leapers of the city of Festos, which was the second biggest city after Knossos for the Minoan. So,
oh wow! So I posted the link to the Minoan Tarot site earlier, and I've just posted lauraperryauthor.com. So check out her books. She has several novels out there in addition to her tarot deck. It's always great when people come on and they have other interests and things that they do than just tarot.
Yeah, if I guess one thing that your folks might actually be interested in, I have a Minoan coloring book. So if you like Minoan stuff, it's all it is accurate but fun line art of Minoan art. So like bull leapers and dolphins and snake goddesses and things.
Right. Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that we will get to chat again soon in person. I do miss tea and tarot, although I know why we don't have it anymore. But I've been thinking to myself, I've got to find an outlet. And this has been kind of it for the last year and a half, is trying to get together with people online to talk about the tarot and that type of thing. So it's always a pleasure to see you. All right, everybody. Until next time, good journeys. All right.